Chapter 23. The Loas warning New Orleans. July 1925. The lower Ninth Ward lay cloaked in the shadows of the late evening, its cypress groves and shotgun houses a world apart from the glittering streets of the French Quarter. The air was thick with the scent of swamp water and sage. The cicadas hum a constant drone beneath the distant wail of a train whistle. Julien Dubois parked the Model T near the edge of the old cypress grove where they'd last met Mama Zora, his dark eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of danger, his hand resting on the revolver at his side. The anointed silver medallion around his neck glowed faintly, its light a dim but constant warning, its power diminished but still a lifeline after the chaos at the Times-Picayune office. AT-35. Julien was a man on the edge, his Creole heritage, his Catholic faith, and the supernatural reality of vampires, ghouls, and shadowy entities now defining his every breath. The fresh stitches on his side and arm throbbed, blood seeping through his bandages from the vampire ambush at the newsroom, but Julien pushed the pain aside, his resolve unyielding. The spirit girl from his past, her hollow eyes in the bayou, marking him as the marked one, whispered in his mind, a haunting echo tied to the entity the DuPonts were trying to summon, an entity Leroux had called my master. His hand brushed the rosary in his pocket, a reflex that felt more like a desperate plea than a prayer, his dark eyes blazing with determination to protect his city and those he cared about. Celeste Moreau sat beside him, her practical blouse and trousers stained with Julien's blood, her auburn hair tied back, her green eyes sharp with focus despite the exhaustion etched into her features. At 28, she was a journalist whose pursuit of truth had led her into a war for New Orleans' soul, her small derringer reloaded but nearly empty, her purse, holding Leroux's journal, the 1895 case file, the grimoire, and her notepad, slung across her shoulder. The grimoire's revelations about the DuPonts' plan to summon a dark entity had raised the stakes, and the ambush at the newsroom had confirmed the urgency of their fight. She glanced at Julien, her expression a mix of determination and worry, the memory of his blood on her hands a constant weight. Eloise Dubois sat in the back with Harold Baxter, her simple blouse and skirt smudged with dirt, her dark hair tied back, her beads clinking softly as she clutched her small knife, her gaze darting to the grove. At 25, she was a jazz singer who'd found her strength in this nightmare, her earlier betrayal now a distant memory as she proved her loyalty with every act of bravery. Her bandaged arm ached, but her resolve was unshaken, her voice a tense whisper. "Mama Zora better be here," she said, her beads a faint rhythm in the stillness. "We're running out of time." Harold Baxter, the gruff editor of the Times-Picayune, sat beside her, his tie still loose, his face pale but his gray eyes hard with determination, his voice a low rumble. "I've got the story ready," he said, his Cajun accent thick, his hands clutching a briefcase with Celeste's notes and evidence. "But I need to get to a safe press. We can't go back to the office, not after that attack. You sure this priestess can help?" Julien nodded, his jaw tight, his dark eyes meeting Celeste's as he spoke, his Creole accent soft but heavy with resolve. "Mama Zora knows more about this kind of magic than anyone," he said, his hand brushing the medallion, its glow flaring faintly. "If anyone can tell us what that entity is, what the DuPonts are summoning, it's her. Let's move." They slipped out of the car, moving silently through the grove, the cypress trees looming like sentinels, their branches draped with Spanish moss that swayed in the breeze. The faint glow of a campfire led them to a clearing, where Mama Zora sat on a log, her gnarled hands working a mortar and pestle, her red tignon a stark contrast to the darkness, her sharp eyes glinting as she looked up, sensing their approach before they spoke. "Julien Dubois," Mama Zora said, her voice a gravelly drawl, her gaze shifting to Celeste, Eloise, and Baxter, her hands stilling as she stood, her beads clinking softly. "And his crew. The spirit's been screamin' 'bout you all night. Trouble follows you like a shadow." Julien stepped forward, the medallion's glow flaring brighter, his voice gruff but respectful, his Creole accent a soft cadence. "We need your help, Mama Zora," he said, his dark eyes meeting hers. "Leroux," He was trying to summon something through a mirror gate, something he called his master. We broke the gate, but the DuPonts are still working to bring it here. We need to know what it is, how to stop it. Celeste pulled the grimoire from her purse, placing it on the log beside Mama Zora, her green eyes sharp with urgency as she spoke, her voice steady despite the fear in her gut. This is their plan, she said, her journalist's instinct cutting through the tension. The DuPonts, they're using these rituals to summon this entity, to control New Orleans. What is it? And how do we end it? Mama Zora's eyes narrowed, her hands trembling slightly as she opened the grimoire, her fingers tracing the crescent moon symbols, her voice a low whisper as she read, her expression darkening with every page. This ain't just dark magic, she said, her voice heavy with dread, her gaze lifting to Julian. This is the work of an old Loa, a spirit of death and shadow, older than the city, older than the bayou. They call it Kalfu, the Loa of the crossroads, the keeper of dark paths. The DuPonts, they're trying to bind Kalfu to this world, to make it their weapon, to rule through its power. Julian's blood ran cold, his hand tightening on the medallion, the spirit girl's whisper echoing in his mind. Julian, a reminder of his role, his fate. Kalfu, he repeated, his voice raw, his Creole accent thickening with dread. How do we stop it? LaRue's still out there, and the DuPonts, they'll try again. Mama Zora's gaze shifted to the medallion, her sharp eyes narrowing as she spoke, her voice a grave warning. Kalfu ain't like LaRue. He ain't a vampire you can burn with that trinket, she said, her hands moving to an altar nearby, adorned with offerings to the Loa, rum, bones, a small skull. To stop Kalfu, you gotta close the crossroads, seal the path he'd use to enter this world. That takes a ritual of your own, one that calls on the Loa of light, like Papa Legba, to block the way. But it comes with a price, a sacrifice, something precious, something you can't get back. Celeste's green eyes widened, her journalist's mind racing, her voice a tense whisper. What kind of sacrifice? She asked, her hand brushing Julian's arm, a gesture of comfort and fear, her gaze darting to Mama Zora. And where do we find this crossroads? Where are the DuPonts planning to summon Kalfu? Mama Zora's expression darkened, her hands moving to scatter protective herbs around the campfire, her voice a whisper as she spoke, her beads clinking softly. The sacrifice, it's different for everyone, she said, her gaze shifting to Julian, her sharp eyes piercing. For you, marked one, it might be a piece of your soul, a memory, or something you love. As for the crossroads, the DuPonts will use a place of power, a place tied to the city's history. The old St. Louis Cemetery No. 1. It's where the veil's thinnest, where Kalfu can cross easiest. They'll try there under the next new moon 3 nights from now. Eloise's beads clinked frantically, her voice a shaky whisper, her gaze darting to the shadows of the grove. 3 nights, she said, her hands trembling, her expression a mix of fear and resolve. That's not much time, and LaRue's still out there, hunting us. Before Mama Zora could respond, a low growl echoed through the grove, the sound reverberating off the cypress trees, sending a chill down Julian's spine. The campfire flickered, its flames dimming as the air grew colder, heavier, charged with a malice they'd felt before. Julian's hand snapped his revolver, the medallion's glow flaring brighter, his voice a growl as he stepped in front of the others, his dark eyes scanning the shadows. We've got company, he said, his Creole accent thick with urgency. 2 ghouls emerged from the trees, their mottled gray skin and black void eyes a stark contrast to the darkness, their jagged teeth snapping as they growled, their jerky movements a promise of violence. Behind them, a single vampire appeared, its red eyes glowing, its fangs glinting, its hiss a deadly whisper as it spoke, its voice a venomous echo of LaRue's. The marked one. It hissed, its claws extended. The DuPonts send their regards. You'll never reach the cemetery. Julian raised the medallion, its light flaring brighter, burning the nearest ghoul as it lunged, its skin sizzling as it shrieked in pain, giving the others a moment to react. Celeste fired her derringer, the shot hitting the vampire in the shoulder, drawing black blood as it hissed, her green eyes blazing with defiance as she shouted, "Baxter, get back." Baxter stumbled toward the car, his briefcase clutched tight, his face pale with fear but his resolve unshaken. Eloise slashed with her knife, her beads clinking frantically, her voice a cry of defiance as she stabbed the second ghoul, its jagged teeth snapping at her as she pulled back, her bandaged arm aching but her movements quick. Mama Zora muttered a prayer under her breath, her hands moving to scatter more herbs, her voice a fierce whisper as she called on the Loa for protection, her beads clinking as she worked. Julian fired his revolver, the gunshot echoing through the grove, the bullet hitting the vampire in the chest, dropping it in a heap of black blood, but the ghouls were relentless, their claws slashing at him, catching his arm and drawing a sharp line of blood. He grunted in pain, pressing the medallion against the nearest ghoul, its light searing through its mottled skin, dropping it in a writhing heap, while Eloise dispatched the second with a final stab, its body collapsing into the dirt, the air stilled, the campfire flaring back to life, the grove silent once more, the cicadas resuming their hum. Julian's chest heaved, his arm and side bleeding heavily, his vision blurring, but he stayed on his feet, his dark eyes meeting Celeste's, a silent promise to keep fighting. "We need to move," he said, his voice gruff, his Creole accent softening with exhaustion. "They'll send more. We need a safe place for Baxter. Then we plan for the cemetery." Mama Zora stepped forward, her sharp eyes narrowing, her voice a grave warning as she handed Julian a small pouch of herbs, her beads clinking softly. "Take this," she said, her hands steady despite the chaos. "It'll ward off the shadows for a time, but Kalfa's power is growing. You've got 3 nights, marked 1. Be ready to pay the price, or this city falls." Celeste helped Julian to the car, her green eyes filled with fear and resolve, her hand pressing against his wounds as she spoke, her voice a promise. "We'll get Baxter to a safe house," she said, her journalist's mind already mapping out their next steps. "Then we prepare for the cemetery. We'll stop Kalfu, Julian. Together." Julian nodded, his hand finding hers, his voice a ragged whisper, his Creole accent a soft cadence in the night. "Together," he said, his dark eyes filled with a warmth that scared him as much as Kalfa did, a silent vow to see this through, no matter the cost. As they drove away from the grove, the city stretching out before them, the medallion's glow flickered, a faint reminder of the power they'd need again, the weight of the future pressing down, the DuPonts, Kalfu, the price Mama Zora had warned about. New Orleans was a city of shadows, and they were running out of time to keep the light alive.